Hey, welcome. Give a chance for everybody to get in, but welcome to Think About It Thursday. I'm Alan Driggers here at the IEP Coach, working with parents and teachers to champion the success of every child. So we're going to be here to answer questions, but we're also going to go over procedural safeguards. So on Tuesdays at 11:30 a.m., we're doing TikTok Tuesdays, and we went over the child find and the definition of a parent or guardian and prior written notice on Tuesday. And so we're going to do this on Thursday nights at 7. So it's out. You can go out and see the video. It's also on YouTube. So you can go to the IEP Coach YouTube and see the first part if you'd like. But tonight we're going to answer questions if we have any, and if not, that's okay. We're also going to go over procedural safeguards. So this is I'm in Texas, and this is our state from the Texas Education Agency, our procedural safeguards. So every parent gets these once a year. You're required by law to get these. And so, but most of the time, nobody ever explains them. Don't explain them to the parents, don't explain them to the teachers. I'm not sure who actually gets explained, because I'm not even sure administrators understand it. To be honest, I'm sure most of them, I hope most of them have read it, but I do know that this is not required reading at anything I ever did in education, not as a special education teacher, not as a general ed teacher, not in special education graduate school for special education, not in teacher certification, never presented to me. Knew about them, heard about them, kind of maybe we talked about a little bit here and there, but not for the most part, no. Definitely didn't know what I know now, so not even close. So what we're going to talk about tonight is two things. One that I'm, I won't say passionate about, but definitely very much down my alleyway of things that that I really enjoyed working with kids with. But the first one's parental consent. So what is parental consent? How do you give it? What is it? How can you, when do you need to give it? What does all that involved? And the next one is about disciplining kids with a disability. So definitely pretty complex, and definitely something parents need to know about, even if your kid's not one that gets in trouble. So parental consent. So I got a couple questions over the one from Tuesday night in the TikTok. Why do I keep looking down? Well, I've got all these, and so I don't know these by memory. I do have a pretty good idea of what each of them mean, but I don't know them word for word, and I like to read them to you word for word. So I'm going to look down a little bit, so you're going to see the top of my head, and it looks like I'm thinning right there, but that's okay. I'm old. Been around a while. So first thing, parental consent. What is parental consent? So parental consent is basically you as a parent giving permission to the school to do something, okay? And in this case, involving special education, usually it's involving evaluation. So you as a parent have the right to request whether or not you want to or not to have your child tested for special education at any time. And you can revoke that at any time. So usually, not always, but a lot of times, special education request will come from somebody within the school. Might be a teacher, might be a counselor. Somebody sees something, and they have an obligation to put in the referral internally so that special education evaluation can be performed. There are no requirements. You don't have to go through, RTI or any kind of steps. It is basically, like we talked about in Child Find on Tuesday, if there's a suspected need, evaluation needs to happen. And so you want to be evaluated, you want a full evaluation, which we'll talk about it on another night. What does a full evaluation look like? But for the purposes of this, you will sign and give sign and consent to an evaluation, and so that is required. It must be in writing, and there is no. So if you request to get for your child to be tested, the school is going to ask you to sign consent. So you want to let them know that you're willing to sign it. However, you can sign it electronically. You can come to the school. However, the school operates. And so from that point forward, there's 45 days. You have 45 days, school days. So you're looking at really, evaluation is about 25% of the school year. And then after that evaluation is done, then you have more time to have, get the IEP and everything implemented. So it is something that if there is a suspect, you don't want to delay it. You want to make it happen pretty quick. So you have to have school must obtain. So I'm going to read straight from this. Before conducting an initial evaluation of your child to determine if your child qualifies as a child with a disability under IDEA, the school must give you this notice of procedural safeguards, a copy of the overview of special education for parents. Again, that's a Texas, but all states will give some form of how the process works. And a notice of a proposed evaluation and prior written notice that there is a proposed evaluation, and get your informed consent. So that's the big word, informed consent. You need to be informed about what you're giving consent to. Okay, so a lot of times they'll say, hey, Johnny needs special ed testing. Okay, what does that involve? Most parents don't ask. They don't know what I mean, they assume, and for good reasons. Schools do know, sometimes can see those things that a parent sometimes don't, because we're with the child every day. But if a teacher requests it and the consent is asked of you, you need to be informed. And part of that informing is knowing your procedural safeguards. What are your rights? So that is the first thing, the initial evaluation. The school must also obtain your informed consent before providing special education and related services to your child for the first time. The school must make reasonable efforts to obtain your informed consent before providing special education and related services to your child for the first time. If you do not respond to a request to provide your consent or for your child to receive special education and related services for the first time, or if you refuse to give such consent, for your child to receive special education and related services for the first time, or you refuse to give such consent or later revoke or cancel your consent in writing, your school may not use the procedural safeguards, in order to obtain agreement or ruling that special education. So basically, the school can't use it against you, in other words. So you can refuse services, but if the school attempts to give it to you, you can't come back on them if you've already given consent. So what they're saying is that, hey, you gave consent, they did all the testing, they couldn't get your approval, they tried numerous times, this is what was decided through the evaluation in the IEP, and you never respond, you never show up for the IEP, the ARD meeting, the IEP meeting. They've tried, 2, 3, or typically 3 times, documented that they've tried to reach you, you haven't responded, they can go ahead and give services because you've already given consent. You can't use the fact that they have started giving the consent without your approval, the actual services with your procedural safeguards, with your rights. But you can immediately refuse or withdraw consent. So they would have to stop. So they went 3 days, you realize what's happening, you don't want them doing it, you can withdraw consent. So that's kind of what that is. The school must get your consent to reevaluate your child. So every 3 years, at minimum, but every 3 years, a triennial, your child would be reevaluated. And you don't have to give consent. You don't. I can't really think of a whole lot of reasons why you wouldn't, because you'd want to know where the child is. You wouldn't want them to, if they're in first grade and they're now in fourth grade, you would hope that they've made improvements and maybe some things have changed, maybe they've matured. Fourth grade to seventh grade, especially as they get older, things may change, and so you want to know that. So if you have you do have an evaluation and you don't think it's right, you don't like it, you think they're missing something, you don't approve it, whatever, you have objection to it, you have the right as a parent to request what's called an IEE. an independent education evaluation. And that is at the school's expense. Okay, so you can request that. You can only do it, I believe it is once a year at the time of an ARD or anytime there's an evaluation done. And so the school has to allow that, or if they don't, you have to go to due process. They have to go to due process before a hearing officer and explain why they don't believe that it should be awarded. Most schools don't, because there's really not any point in it, because it ends up honestly, it costs schools more money to go to a hearing officer and the attorneys and everything that it does, just to pay for the evaluation. But here's the catch, though. As a parent, you need to know this. The IEE is at public expense, so at the district expense. The criteria under which the evaluation is obtained, so how the evaluation is received or applied or given to the child, must include the same qualifications that the school would use. So must be the same as the criteria the school uses when it initiates an evaluation, to the extent those criteria are consistent and you're right to obtain an IEE. So you can, as a parent, can pick who you want, but that person must have the same qualifications and doesn't have to be on the district vendor list. You can pick anybody, but they must meet the qualifications and the criteria that the school uses within their own personnel. Now, with an IEE, the school doesn't have to accept it. They have to consider it. So if you have an external IEE and you come and say, "See, I told you Johnny was, he had a learning, a comprehension issue or disability," and the school says, "Oh, we didn't see that," they have to consider that, but they don't have to accept it as part of the IEP. So you just need to understand that. But that is appealable. I mean, you can go. You can have that discussion in the IEP meeting with the rest of the IEP team, and definitely do. I would highly suggest that. So a couple other things. You can have an IEP done at any time at your own expense. Okay, so as a parent, if you want to pay for it out of your own pocket, you can do that anytime. And just as if you had one that if it was at school, the public expense, the district still has to consider, even if you paid for it. Okay, but it still has to meet the same criteria as the staff that's on. How the school staff has the same qualifications. I was going to say one other thing. The IE can be ordered by the hearing officer. So if the school decides to go to a due process hearing, the hearing officer can order the school to order it and have it done. So that's about it on the informed consent and IEE. I was just going to double check. I thought there was one more thing I wanted to go over, but that's okay. All right. So that's what it was. If the school pays for the IEE, don't expect you to get a copy of it before the school does. Just because the school paid for it, it's theirs. They should provide you with a copy of it, but they will probably review it and look over it before they give it to you. You should get it in its entirety. So you should get the whole package. Nothing should be abbreviated. So just know that. Just because you requested it, just because it's your child, doesn't mean you're going to get it first. Okay, so school should and will. They'll provide it. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about procedures when disciplining children with disabilities. Okay, this gets kind of convoluted. There's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding and how this is supposed to operate. So one of the first things you want to know whenever a child is disciplined, and it goes into the IEP, at the IEP or ARD meeting, is the student held to the standard of the student code of conduct? So in some instances, they won't be. So a life skill student or a student with a severe disability who let's say he strikes, he gets physical. they're not going to, if they don't recognize that, if they have a traumatic brain injury, or if they're, they're intellectually disabled, or they have some other kind of disability that impairs their critical thinking, their reasoning, their intellectual ability to interpret that hitting is wrong, you might take that off, make sure that that's in the IEP, that they are not held to the student code of conduct because of their disability. Okay, but you'd have to talk about what they are held to, though. Okay, so we're going to talk about students that are typically held, or that are held to the code of conduct, because I think that's majority, and the exceptions are there are some, and those need to be considered, but we're not going to talk about them so much tonight. We'll get them in another episode. So it's all discipline for disability kids are on a case-by-case determination. There is no chart. There is no, you can have, I know a lot of schools will use like a ladder. Most of them have gotten away from it, but they'll use like a ladder. You do this once, you do this twice. With kids with disabilities, that goes out the window. It's a case-by-case. It's determined by really the IEP team, or those members that are needed, that are determined by the parent and the administration that need to be a part of it. But to the extent that a student with disability, they cannot be out of placement. So out of their norm, if they're in resource, they can't be moved to ISS, can't be moved to DAEP, or an alternative education placement, for more than 10 days without having what's called a MDR, okay? A manifestation determination review. So while that happens, that has to happen within 10 school days of any decision to change the placement. So Johnny, this is what kind of typically happens. Somebody gets in let's just say a fight at school. They send the kids home for the day. You might send them home for a couple of days if there needs to be an investigation. They come back. There's usually a discipline hearing of some form. That is where all the investigation will be discussed with the parents. Sometimes the child, depends on the age. And though anybody that needs to be a part of it, typically 2 administrators. There's one that is kind of the admin considered, and then there's one that would kind of talk about what happened. And so when that happens, and they just say, okay, so Johnny's going to get a DAEP placement. They have, or at the 10 days, or at the disciplinary hearing, they have 10 days to hold a manifestation determination, 10 school days, okay? You can't table this. It has to happen within 10 days. Can't be less. It's advisable to be less, but it has to happen. And there's 2 questions that are asked at this meeting. 2 questions at the MDR. And this is what you want to know. You're looking for 2 yeses, 2 nos, or obviously some kind of combination, which does. But any first question is the conduct in question, was it caused by or had a direct and substantial relationship to the child's disability? So was the action or whatever they're being disciplined for as a direct result of their disability? So you have to look at that. You have to consider that. The disability does need to be considered. The second question is the conduct in question a direct result of the school's failure to implement the child's IEP? So you want, if both of those are yes, then you're going to have to look at have that discussion about the placement. If both questions are no, then the child's going to be placed in an alternative setting typically. So let's talk about how these work a little bit. So the conduct in question caused by or had a direct to substantial relationship. So here's the kind of the thing you need to think about. Does it have a direct and a substantial relationship? So if you have a student that punched another student and their disability is reading comprehension, there's no way you're going to be able to say that punch happened is a direct result of their disability, them having a specific learning disability of reading comprehension. They're not correlated. If the student is maybe autistic and doesn't like to be touched, and somebody keeps bumping into them, and they push somebody, that could be considered direct and substantial. So you kind of have to look at it. Again, it's a case-by-case determination. The other question you want to ask is it a direct result of the school's failure to implement a child's IEP? So again, child has an SLD of a reading comprehension. Teacher didn't supply the accommodations, hasn't all year. Could you say if that child's in that classroom and really frustrated, then yeah, you could say that might be caused by the IEP. But they're at lunch and they pop a student in the lunchroom. Probably doesn't have anything to do with their disability and reading comprehension. Okay. Where you will see this a lot is kids that have emotional disabilities. Sometimes you'll see it a lot with OHI, with attention deficit disorders, kids that can't stay still, leave the room. And there's all sorts of, there's not like a textbook or a checklist of what we're looking for, but those are just some common ones that I've seen in my career. So if the school and you and if the school and you and the members of the ARD committee, the IEP meeting, determine that the conduct was a manifestation of the child's disability, the ARD committee must either conduct a FBA, a functional behavior assessment, unless the school has conducted one within the last 12 months, so last year. So if they determine it was, you have to have an FBA done. Okay, the FBA has to be, conduct a functional behavioral assessment unless the school has conducted a functional behavior assessment before the behavior that resulted in a change of placement. So it's a bunch of words that, I'm not real sure why they have to make it so complicated, but basically, if the student hasn't had an FBA within the last 12 months, they have to have one. Okay. If they have had one within the last 12 months and it's a similar behavior or a behavior that was already known, then they don't. If this is a new behavior, you have to have one. Okay. You also have to have a BIP. You have to have a behavior intervention plan. Needs to be developed, reviewed, and put in place. All right. That was a mouthful there. All right. So special circumstances. So there are some violations, discipline, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. There's 3 of them in particular. And these are the ones that I think you'll understand why. So, but a child cannot be put out of placement for more than 45 days. Typically, that is the rule. 45 days for any kid with a disability. You're not going to go more than that. But these 3 special circumstances, whether or not the behavior was a manifestation of your child's disability, it doesn't matter. Okay? The school can still remove your child. Carries a weapon to school or has a weapon at school, on school premises, or at a school function that is under the jurisdiction of the TEA or the school. Knowingly has or uses illegal drugs, or sells or solicits the sale of controlled substances while at school, on school premises, or at a school function under the jurisdiction of the TEA or a school. Has inflicted serious bodily injury. So there's a definition, and I'll go over that in a minute, of what that is, upon another person while at school, on school premises, or at school function under the jurisdiction of TEA or the school. So illegal drug is any controlled substance that basically violates the Controlled Substance Act. So anything that's going to get, even in the real world, is going to get you probably arrested at the very minimum, ticket of some kind to appear in court. So I know one of the things that in some states marijuana is legal, in Texas it is not. So that is considered a controlled substance. You get caught with the vape pen that has THC in it. First of all, you're not old enough to even have it in Texas. You have to be 21 to have the offshoots of the hemp and all that. But if you has THC, then that's against the law. Serious bodily injury has the meaning is that serious bodily injury as given to it's the title. So basically, it's physically altering, like maiming, breaking a bone. It can't be just like I kicked him in the shin and I got a bruise. That's not serious bodily injury. It's something it's severe. Okay, blood, that kind of stuff. That's what you're looking for. And then a weapon is obviously a gun, knife. There's actually it's interesting in IDEA, there is actually a provision about knives being brought to school. For whatever reason, the IDEA is actually the knife is longer, bigger than it is in state law. So I thought that was interesting. So they measured the blade. I think IDEA is 5 and the state is 4. I don't know. That or vice versa. Either way. But so if you have a change of placement because of discipline referral and the removal is for more than 10 days, or there's a pattern. So let's say you've got a student that your child is, I don't know, skipping school. And they've done it a couple of times. They've gone through, been detention or, sent, whatever, sent to the principal's office, whatever. And so now they send them to ISS for 2 days, in-school suspension. They did it again, sent to in-school suspension, this time for 3 days. So that's 5 total. Did it again, sent them to ISS for 5 days. Okay. That's now 10 days. You have to have an MDR because it's a similar behavior, and it's over 10 days. Now, on the other hand, so he does 2 days, skips and gets 2 days, skips and gets 3 days. And now let's say he's being disruptive in a classroom and gets 5 days. I don't know. That's not the same. So that doesn't count as 10 days that are, but similar behavior. Okay. So that's what you're looking for, is similar behavior, a pattern of behavior. Okay. All right. At any time, a parent may appeal. Typically, you want to, you could file a due process complaint. You can also file a district grievance, which I have found pretty much is a waste of time, to be honest with you, because the district is going to usually side with whatever the campus agrees to. So, I mean, you can go to your admin downtown or your central office, wherever it's at. And you can usually have a director of some kind of student services or superintendent of students or dean of students or something like that, and they will hear your argument. Usually it's not going to go in your favor because obviously they have a vested interest in backing their administration. If they didn't, that would cause a lot of issues as far as morale within the school. It usually does. And so they were going to defer to their campus administration because they're closer to it. And I understand that. They should. I hope they do. Unless it's just really, really just out in left field, which, I mean, I guess it can happen, but I've never seen that. Most campus administration understands the kids, you hope, and understands the issues. And so if you feel it's egregious, you need to go to file a state complaint or an OCR complaint, Office of Civil Rights, if it's a civil right violation. So, and that's stuff that we do at the IEP Coach. We help our families with that. And so that's really, there's so much. So I'll just say this about out of placement. If your student is in school suspension, your student is in an alternative education, they are still entitled to their services. So any service, any accommodation that they receive in a classroom setting, whether it be a gen ed, like an inclusion resource, a life skills, any academic. So if you're in an elective or a career, and you're getting Usually you don't get those, so you may not have a special education teacher there for you. But math, English, science, foreign language, social studies. If you are given in your IEP that you have services provided, accommodations, modifications, that must be provided in an alternative setting also. Okay, so I don't really see any questions tonight. But that's okay. So we're going to go. So Tuesday, on TikTok Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, we will start our next section. Let me look this up real quick here. I feel like I've had my head down a lot reading because a lot of this is so many words in your mouth. Let's see. We're going to talk about voluntary private school placement by parents, how that happens, what happens, what the parents' rights are. Does the school responsible for paying for it? There are some situations where that can happen. But the procedural safeguards actually spells it out. So we'll talk about that on Tuesday. Also, transfer of parental rights. So if parents are going to, how do you transfer the parental rights? How is it done legally, voluntarily, as a parent, if they're going to be, gone, or, parents incarcerated, and grandmom is taking care of the kids, how do you transfer parental rights? And how is that done legally, either through the court system or not in the court system? So we'll talk about that. I just want to say, if you're a parent and you've got questions about special education, feel free to reach out. You can drop a message, even if this video is not live. I will keep up. I'll get the messages from here. Drop me at IEP Coach or Alan Driggers. Doesn't matter. You can drop me a message. You can go to www.iepcoach.com. We've got a little general questionnaire. You can fill that out. Put a little message in there. It'll be emailed to me. I'll get back to you usually within 24 hours or at least the next business day. But other than that, that's really about it for tonight. I hope this helps. I hope it makes some sense. And we will see you, if not sooner, we'll see you on Tuesday with TikTok Tuesday. Y'all have a great night.